Our base class for all of our tests going forward is page.py, and this has all the most common functions. When I say most common, this should be common to every project that we're going to implement a page object model in. And I have to give credit to Wade. I forget his last name, but he's from LinkedIn, and it was in the summer of this year that we saw a presentation. We actually co-presented with him at our offices, and his presentation, and he uses, I think, was it Ruby or? Ruby. It was Ruby, yeah. And so he had some extra stuff that we can't do in Python without some extra work. But his page object model and reading up on the internet allowed us to come up with a pretty good way of doing it. And again, the syntax highlight I keep apologizing for is pretty poor, but it's things like verifying page titles, and really doesn't get into the header footers because that's going to vary by project, but page titles and any kind of, get links per page, those kinds of things. Very, very common things. So this is a very, very small file, and every test case every lower level test case will inherit this from the base class. So on the lower level, we have the actual project page.py. And this is all common elements of that specific project page, like login, logout, and as I mentioned, the headers, the footers. You can't see it here, but these logout links, my account links, these are either the CSS locators or the XPath for those links. And again, those are going to be project specific. And that's pretty much it. And that's as short as the file is. There's a bunch of things underneath it in terms of clicks and verifies, but again, they're going to be specific to just a sumo page, any sumo page, not a specific type of page like a search page or a knowledge base page. And then if you have a home page like this, the page elements are defined as class variables, and these are all the very, very specific things. So go _to_support _homepage, and then you pass it the self object. And then beneath that you have the traditional selenium.open and the selenium verify page title, and you pass it self.title. And again, in here you would specify very specific main search box, divs, and CSS locators and XPath as well. And the final thing is the very specific page that you're trying to test. And again, I was having a great discussion with David Burns on how granular our test names should be, and file names as well. So test search on homepage.py. In this specific case, there's only one search box on the homepage, so it's very clear. If there were multiples, you would, of course, rename that differently. But this is going to be a little bigger than most of the other tests. You'll notice quite a bit more imports in the front. This is going to import the homepage class, the search page class, the refined search page class, the login page class, and the sumo test data. So whatever you need to test that specific page, you're going to have to import those individual page functions. And this will go through and do a bunch of set timeout calls and opens. The nice thing about this is that the syntax is very clear. So test_search on homepage is just like the title of the file, and that's the main function. And whether that returns true or false or pass and fail, will go back up the chain, and vice versa. If you have a call in our top level classes and you inherit those as base classes, if those calls fail, when you call that from this, you won't even run these tests. So there's no chance of running tests continuously without the base class working. So it saves us a lot of time. So some of the benefits are easy to see. It's easy to read and write tests. They're very legible. If you need a search page, and it's a specific search page, you just import the search page.py. It reduces the amount of duplicated code that you have. There's less ramp-up time for new testers in the community, which is one of the most important reasons that we did this. As folks on my automation team and folks in the Selenium world have said, it doesn't make non-coders able to write tests because there's still flow control and looping and things like that. They still have to understand variables and inheritance. But what it does do is allow someone to, at a glance, look at a test case, figure out what it does, and if there's a problem with it, should allow them to fix it. There's no more giant function files. We don't have a 2,000-line file of all the functions in a given project. All those functions are spread up amongst the pages and classes that use them. The caveat is that, and we've seen this just within the last couple of weeks, if a string change in the footer, or if an XPath changes or a locator changes in the footer of a page, and since that's a common element in every page test for that, every test will fail. And the other thing is that multiple imports. So if you go back here, you can see there's quite a bit of imports. My coworker wrote that. I'm not sure that that matters a whole lot, given the size of the other files that you had to import as well. So I'm not sure if he was saying that's a memory or just maybe a space issue. But so the future for us is projects in the page object model where it makes sense, and that's typically the case. There are some exceptions. We have a crash reporting system that we actually share with Google called BreakPad. It's also codenamed Socorro. Really aren't pages there. They're just multiple views of the same application. So I don't think a page object model makes sense there, at least not in the detail and the breakdown that we have for the other projects. Other things we've looked at are building in the screen and video captures that Sauce Labs has, and I think have been largely open sourced, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And the other thing is we have not really looked at Selenium 2, which I'm excited to hear about the updates to Selenium 2. I know that it's supposed to be backwards compatible for the most part, or pretty much all of it, but we'd like to update our tests into the new framework. The one thing that we'd like to see, and again, I should have said a caveat at the beginning, I'm not the automation lead, I'm the web QA lead, so I lead the whole team, both of manual testers and automated testers. Dave Burns is actually our automated lead. Automation lead, excuse me. You're not automated, but but you are that good, so take that as a compliment. Things that we'd like to see, and we've actually been bitten by in our testing framework, is every 6 or 9 months or so, our add-ons team likes to change the way the Add to Firefox and Download Now buttons work on the add-ons website. And there's a whole, the logic used to be written in PHP, then it's in Python, and it's still written in Python, but they like to keep changing that. The XPath changes. In Firefox 4, we dropped the, from the user agent string, we dropped the locale. So the only locale that we use now to detect is actually in the accept headers. So we would like to see, and maybe this exists in Selenium too, we would like to see native HTTP header manipulation so that we can do things like mock browsers. In the past, we've done, with the IDE, we've done things like preloading profiles with a user agent switcher with a bunch of different things and had to script that. It's very, very painful. So if we could do that on the fly just with accept headers, that would be great. So that's something for me to follow up on. And finally, here's a list of our resources and references. Sorry for the formatting, but I like the rest of the template style, but I don't like the bullets. But anyways, the top is our homepage, WebQA homepage. It's a wiki, as you can tell, Decky wiki. The automation page on QMO. QMO is our quality.mozilla.org. That's kind of the hub for Mozilla QA, both client Firefox and the web QA as well. And we'll be migrating stuff over as time permits. And finally, and by the way, that is, I don't think the QMO is publicly editable by all, but the web QA homepage is. So if off of the homepage there are things in automation, specifically Selenium, either RC, IDE, best practices, guidelines, whatnot, that you think are wrong or you have questions about or would like to see changed, feel free to contact us or just add a note on that page with your contact details and we'll incorporate that feedback. And finally, we have a public mailing list. I have to mention that it's public because it's, even though it's opt-in, I think it gets aggregated out to a news group. So are there any questions?
You said that page object model led to less ramp-up time for new testers in the community. Like, in my experience, it's done the opposite. It's, once the infrastructure is there, it's great, you can write tests, but having to do it for each page is hassly, it takes time, and it's hard to convince people it's worth it. Like, how have you
Yeah, so I believe the question was that your experience with the page object model being easier for ramp up time for community members to contribute was opposite to what I asserted. We actually, which is fair, because we actually haven't had a great deal of community involvement in the page object model. We used to have a bunch of community from the UK people in college contribute one-off IDE tests, and some of them wrote a little bit of PHP tests. So maybe that is the case. The idea is that the page object model would be easier for them to kind of get a glance of the project as a whole and then start in. Whereas you're right, I think the individual tests would be easier to write without the page object model, but I think as time goes on, they would find their way easier. So maybe it's one of those cases where it's an initial ramp up time is a little steeper, but it would either level out or kind of plateau and go down a little bit. But yeah, maybe you could help us test the model, or anyone else. Jason?
Just for fun, given that it's open source, can people check out all the code and
Yes.
run these tests?
Yes. So all of our code is in SVN. I actually should have put that in there. The links to our code are on our web testing page, but I could probably stand to make those a little more visible.
So is it dependent on like database setup or anything like that, or can you just run them?
Database setup, no. We do have grid connection stuff. Some of it, especially the admin test, we've had to abstract away into local files. So our preview sites and our production sites are in the same cluster, and if you have access to the preview site, you basically have access to production. But any of the traditional end user facing sites are available, and those are checked in. The tests for those are checked into SVN.
So to rephrase, if I pointed random test against your production website,
No.
Okay.
No. Not unless you're running the admin one, but we have a different problem there. So, no. In fact, we would welcome that. So, yeah. Anybody else? And by the way, I already mentioned, but most of our apps are Django, so our story is a lot better on the developer front. The developers used to use either Simple Test or PHP Unit, but they're much more comfortable using Django and fixtures now than they were before in PHP. So it's helped QA kind of figure out what we need to augment and where as well. All right. Thank you.